So commitment is more than just, I will stay with you no matter what. Commitment is, where am I putting my time and my energy? And am I willing to sacrifice a bit of uncomfortable in order to keep moving forward through whatever difficult season we're in? It's keeping the long view in mind. And I'll tell you, when you're committed, you can go through anything. Hey,
how you doing?
We're going to talk about healthy habits for marriage and really relationships, but specific to husband-wife relationship.
Yeah, we're big fans of marriage. You know that. If you've listened to the podcast before, healthy relationships, huge fans of that. It takes a ton of work. It's exhausting, but it's so worth it. Yeah.
It's worth it. And they're just like any development, organizationally, child development, marriages have stages. And, you know, if you move through some of those rough stages, you get some reward on the other side. But it's not a one and done. So there's a journey and an ongoing work to healthy relationships. So first, before we continue, let's just talk about my bangs. Let's just bring them into the room.
Wow. Your bangs. I love them. They're so cute. But they require a lot.
Yeah. I think you've been hearing me say that a lot. I feel like I have a new baby.
Or a puppy.
Or a puppy.
It's like a puppy, you said.
These bangs require a lot from me. I can't just live my life. So,
well, they say that if you've been married long enough to the same person, you've actually been married to 7 people, because they change so much during the course of the journey. And yeah, so I kind of like this new Tara a little bit.
A little sassy. So if I get a little sassy today, it's the bangs. Hey, so you made a really good point actually about marriage and changing throughout marriage, and that there's kind of a myth out there that, you know, you aren't who I married and I fell out of love with you and we've changed so much, we just don't go together. But reality is changing is a part of marriage and being humans, healthy humans. We grow, we shift. Who we were at 25 is different than who we are in our late 40s. That's a good thing.
I think so. I hope so. Yeah. I mean, brains get fully developed around the 24 to 26 kind of time period.
28 for men.
And I tell you that it's great to have fully developed brains. You get the best chance to be the best human that you can be in that scenario. And yes, hopefully you're learning. I know you can choose not to learn.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do. And they find themselves in the same ruts, the same circles.
True.
Libraries have been written about how to get unstuck. I mean, there's just so much wisdom out there. There's good wisdom. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't make any sense and is all searching for good wisdom. But there's good stuff that's out there, and we're trying to tap into it and encourage you as listeners to tap into the good stuff. That's what we're trying to bring to you in this podcast with Living Wholehearted. Our guests are people that we admire and look to, experts in their fields, and we're bringing the things that we've collected on our journey as well to try to offer expertise and help and hope.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So let's just talk about like one of our earliest issues. I think we finally solved it. But, you know, over the years, as we've matured, when we were younger, I remember our first year of marriage, it was literally about bobby pins.
Okay, I was wondering which was you were going to pick.
I mean, we have a lot of different ones that have became issues, but the bobby pins, this is how it went. I seem to use bobby pins in my hair. So
we're in a hair theme.
Yeah, hair theme. Okay. It is a hair theme today.
Okay.
And I would take them out, or they would fall out and they would land around our first apartment.
Everywhere.
No big deal in my mind. But after a while, this drove Jeff nuts.
It's a big deal to vacuums. It's a big deal for slipping, getting poked. I think I even had puncture wounds from
Okay, right. So there was this day where Jeff came with all his efforts to regulate, saying we need to talk about the bobby pins. And it took everything in me to not laugh in his face when he was really upset that the bobby pins, this is just showing how immature I was. But really, I was like, it's no big deal. Why are you so upset about the bobby pins? They're tiny, they're bit. And he was like, everything has its place. And where bobby pins need to have a home. They should not just be scattered around.
And I had never had any roommates that used bobby pins before. I mean, all my guy friends didn't have long hair. Okay, so
that's fair.
This is new territory. We got to negotiate.
Yeah, that was the late 90s. And little short hair was in for men. So in terms of the bobby pins, what we realized as we worked through the bobby pin issue, it was less about Jeff being obsessive compulsive and me being a disaster and a mess and not caring. It was really more about respect at the end of the day. We had to really work through a lot of...
I don't have obsessive compulsive. So
I'm not
just
saying.
a disclaimer.
I'm just saying that I went there in my mind. Like, oh no, I married someone who's really controlling and anal. That's where I went in my head.
I thought I married a slob.
And you married a slob, but that's not true of either of us.
Right.
We just had a little bit of a different way to approach cleaning in our house. So at the end of the day, we compromised and we found a drawer. We're a happy home for the bobby pins.
Right.
And again, to honor and really hear where Jeff was coming from and not to mock him, I had to really intentionally think about pulling out each of those bobby pins, putting them in a drawer, and making sure they found their happy home.
Love, that is love right there.
Yes. But I will tell you that over the years, those bobby pins sometimes find themselves, I don't know how, all over the house.
And they're not as big of a deal.
Well, but I also...
I just hand them to you.
Okay, you do. However, I also, every time I see them, I remember, oh yes, everything has a place. And for Jeff, he feels really respected and loved and at home when things are in its place. So you are not anal retentive at all. And you're very gracious with how we do our home. But I just laugh at some of those early conflicts and the reflection of our wirings that we talk a lot about even here today. And
you love it when certain things are put away in their places too, like dishes.
I do.
On the counter.
And I've become more anal retentive over the years. And you've relaxed
you heard it first here, folks. You heard it first here.
All right. Well, one of the things when we talk about healthy habits for couples, you'll hear us sprinkle it in throughout our podcast, but we've kind of just wanted to focus in. It's the month of love in February, and to talk about what do healthy couples actually do. And the first simple principle is that they take time. They're students of one another. So we pull a lot of our research from the Dr. John and Julie Gottman, who are some of the leading experts on healthy relationships. And you can Google them and find all kinds of things. But we lean heavily as a Gottman trained marriage and family therapist into their research. And one of the things they say is one of the foundations of a healthy relationship is really being known. Do you know your spouse? And it's easy after dating and those early years of marriage when you're really excited to get to know each other. You stop asking each other questions. You stop being curious and you start thinking you really know each other, what that face means and what that attitude means or what that schedule means, or why you do what you do. We assume a lot. And in healthy relationships, you don't assume. You stay curious and you keep trying to know one another over the years.
This is kind of their love maps concept that you want to build. Love maps, they call it.
Good job.
And it's just knowing each other. It's really being attuned. And I think that idea of staying curious and humble, and it helps support that. Who are you? And that sense that you have when it's early on in the relationship. You can keep that. You can maintain that. My grandparents almost made it to 73 years, and they still had that kind of joy and sense of, ooh, what now? You know? And I watched it firsthand. It's remarkable to be able to have that. What a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. But you do have to decide in your heart that you're not going to put somebody in a box and think that you just sort of, that's, and let yourself slide into a space that's where that person remains.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that. You don't want that when someone does that to you. So yeah, you choose.
I love it. So case in point, you're folding your arms right now, and body language is a big part of getting to know one another. So instead of assuming I know exactly what you're doing right now and why you're folding your arms, I might say, hey, Jeff, you're folding your arms right now. What's going on? Are you cold or you frustrated with me? Or
great question. No, I'm just stretching my fingers.
You're stretching your fingers.
Yeah, it's comfortable. I've got this new sweater thing that you bought me.
Love it.
for Christmas, and it's just cozy, and I'm cozy next to you. You're wearing a sweater, and so our sweaters are
okay. All right. Well, the other piece of that bottom of the house of knowing one another's love maps is simple things like, do you know what each other likes? I laugh because over the years, I have changed my latte drink. Living in the Pacific Northwest, we're one of the first to have Starbucks up here, and now it's everywhere. But back in the day, I liked mint mochas. I think that was my college drink. And then I matured to caramel macchiatos. And then I became dairy-free, and now I am an oat chai. And so Jeff, over the years, has had to really track that if he's ever wanted to go get my drink as a surprise. Yeah. And so knowing one another, what each other likes, and being curious and checking in. It's fun to be able to surprise one another, but also every so often being like, hey, has anything changed about what you love to do, what you're curious about? And then also with each other's hobbies, getting to know each other's hobbies. So fly fishing is maybe not my passion, but it's your passion. So every once in a while, you might hear me say, tell me about that fly, and I will listen.
Yes.
Okay, it's really
I cannot remember the last time you asked me about that.
Okay, note to self, I'll work on that.
But we're talking about the Gottmans. You mentioned the Gottmans, of course, that being the basis, but this is their model of the sound relationship house, and I don't think we articulated that at first. And the building the love maps is kind of at the bottom of this space. This is key. We want to talk about the sidewalls here.
No,
not yet.
I'm working my way up.
Okay, but that's what we're talking about is their model of the sound relationship house. Okay, so keep going.
Good. Okay, well, following that, the next piece is admiration. And so CVI, the Core Values Index, you'll hear us use that as our number one resource in understanding our own wiring and the hard-natured wiring of your spouse or anybody in your relationships at work or at home. Mm-hmm. The Core Values Index really helps you know one another's love map. It also helps you understand where your greatest contributions are so you can build admiration and appreciation and to go, I'm not good at that, but you are. And thank you for being that. And so you hear us talk in that way, but in healthy relationships, we know our limits and we appreciate the teamwork it takes. And there's a constant attitude shift of trying to really make sure you focus on the donut, the best of who someone is, and not the whole, which is the worst of who someone can be sometimes.
We love that from Dr. Gary Landreth, the metaphor of the donut, focusing on what is, all the sprinkles, all the colors, all the textures, and noticing that in people. We can do so much better at that. And when we do, and when someone does that for us, it's amazing. It feels amazing. And start there. It's not that you would avoid the whole, but it's the right place to start is his wisdom. Yeah.
So the last piece of getting to know one another's love map, and then we'll move to positive perspective.
Nice lighting. Okay, there we go.
The sun has come out in Oregon. Is being able to know your family of origin and to know your story. So
important.
One of the things when I say family of origin, that's the family you grew up in. And the family we grow up in, where our needs were met or where our needs weren't met, really impacts a relationship. And healthy couples do their work in getting to know their own story as well as getting to know their spouse's story with compassion and empathy, not excuses like, well, I have an anger problem because of this. It's more of I have an anger problem and I need to work on this because it's been a generational piece that started with my grandparents, right? And it's passed on down. And so I need to keep working on this. So it's a compassion piece and an empathetic builder rather than pointing the finger and blaming and shaming ourselves and one another.
Just if you took the time to meet with someone who is trauma-informed, whether a professional counselor, coach, that could do a timeline with you, it would be one of the greatest investments in your life. You becoming healthier makes you a better partner and makes you a better colleague at work, a boss, a parent. It's going to make you better and it's going to impact others around you. And we generally try to assume the best, that people really want to be the best version of themselves. So we want to grow. There are few exceptions to that if you're a sociopath or a clinical narcissist. But most of us really want to grow and get better. And this is so valuable because what you learned in your first classrooms is how you're living out today. Whether you know it, believe in that's true or not, it's happening. And to get to know that is to better understand your impact on others and their impact on you. And to get that baggage down, if there is baggage, and we all have it from our families of origin, and we are contributing to it right now as parents. Our kids are going to have some things that they have to work through that we impacted them in ways that weren't perfect. Well, so try to get it down. The point is, by doing that hard work, you would then become more available to actually love and serve others rather than using others to get your needs met in unhealthy ways.
Yeah.
And that's a journey of a lifetime, and it's a worthy pursuit. And it pays huge dividends in the present and in the future.
Yeah. And if you're married and you want to have a healthier relationship and your spouse is not interested in this, start with yourself. Go do your own story work. And the way that impacts your marriage is profound. And not that we can, if we're healthy and our spouse is unhealthy, that's a very difficult marriage, but you have a better chance for moving it towards health if one of you starts in getting to know your story and your triggers and the baggage you brought into your marriage. One example that I always try to be real and honest, and Jeff's always like, "Where are you going?"
Yeah, where are you going? Oh boy.
But one example is one that I don't think I wrestle with as much anymore. But for many years in our relationship, I struggled with feeling heard. And ironically, I have a lot of words, so I can go on and on and on. And Jeff's like, "I don't get it. I've been listening to you for a long time. How do you not feel heard?" And so doing a lot of my own work, my own story, and the way that I was raised, my wiring, the dynamics of cultural backdrops really played a role in how I viewed my voice as a woman and my ability to speak up when I felt hurt or disappointed. I didn't have a lot of practice doing that prior to marriage. And so lucky Jeff got to be a part of that. But for years, I wanted to blame him for that when really I came to an understanding that this is my participation in this. If I want to be heard, I need to speak up. I need to practice learning how to share my thoughts in a healthier way and not explode or stuff, which would have been my patterns. And then Jeff being sensitive and more tender, recognizing that this was a wound I brought into the marriage, took years to kind of keep going back to the basics of like, okay, it might take longer to have Tara feel heard than maybe if she came in with a different story. So that compassion really does help us. And healthy couples do that. They don't re-wound each other by going, "I know where your hurt is, and then I'm going to just poke at it." It's more of, "I know where your hurt is, and I want to be a part of healing," because we're hurt in relationships, Dr. Hendricks says, and we're healed in relationships. So marriage has an opportunity to do a lot of healing for us if we even work on this bottom part of the sound relationship house.
Yeah, and that situation right there is just one situation, but it's a big one for us. And it did take a lot of work. There was a lot of fumbles, it took me a long time with the commitment to want to grow, which both of us have, we had to work hard at it because it's easy to take things personally. And you have to keep these bigger pictures in mind. And if we want to be a helper in relationship to help others heal, you've helped me heal in many ways. I get to help you heal. That's a huge privilege, and especially in our relationship, in our marriage. Knowing what's actually happening, knowing where it came from, how can we be part of the solution, and gaining skills that actually work has been transformational. And just that issue alone. Now, sometimes it flares up again, right? Because I'm selfish at times and I don't want to take time to listen. And I am being kind of a butthead about it, right? And then all of those triggers kind of come back and come forward, and I still have to choose, and so do you, as to how we're gonna negotiate that. So it's not like we've reached this place where we never go back. No, and hopefully it encourages you guys as well that are listening. Yeah, this is a trajectory of growth, and we have gotten so much better.
Okay, so that leads to what you're talking about is the next step of the Gottman's house, which is perspective. Having a perspective of hope, a positive perspective, they call it. Maybe 1 Corinthians 13 says, "Love always hopes." So what does that mean in your mind? Because I feel like you do that really well in our relationship.
Thank you. Well, I did have it modeled in many ways with my grandparents. They weren't just always super positive. They, had hurts, had fears, had challenges, excuse me. But they did choose a positive perspective, and that for them it was rooted in their faith, and they knew who God was, and they knew who they were as His children, and they spent a long time staying connected to Him, and they chose every day and through the moments of the day, just like we all have to choose. They chose to take Him at His word, to practice the spiritual disciplines, to grow, and to be generous with one another. And so when we talk about positivity and we have a positive perspective, it's hopeful. And for us as believers, followers of Jesus, our hope is secure. It's there's an assurance there that allows us to come back. It's like a bedrock that we can stand on. Thank God for that. If those that are listening, if you don't have that, that's something that I definitely encourage you, of course, to encourage you. Your whole life probably has been drawn towards wanting that, seeking that, and you can find it in a relationship with Jesus. He provides that. We were designed for it. And so that informs everything else. So that's the source and the center of having a positive perspective. Now, the Gottmans, they're Jewish culturally, and so they aren't going to articulate particularly that this is the source, although they would recognize faith as a big component in having a healthy life. And I think even all the secular research out there is beginning to and has been supporting that in a long ways towards longevity and towards satisfaction and other things. So positive perspective is so important. The battle is in our heads, of course, because some researchers have indicated that negative self-talk that occupies up to 77 some percent, near that. Nearly 3/4 of our thoughts are negative self-talk. Some researchers have discovered, which is just, what a battle, right? And we all feel it. You wake up and sometimes just the weather makes you feel like, oh, crap, today's going to be a day like that, and discourages you. Or maybe you've got really some hard things that you're facing and going through. Doesn't mean that you just fake something, but you're choosing to be connected to things that are true. And there's hope. And I have found a little rhythm that has helped me. You mentioned this, that I try to practice this, and one thing is that's helped me, I've found to be true in my life, is that usually my circumstances and how I feel about anything are going to change in about 24 hours or less. And that's an anchor point for me, because I've used sort of data over time to prove that to be true. So when I'm feeling pretty low, or I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling angry or something, I feel an injustice. If I can just hold on to that and quickly latch on to the fact that I'm probably going to feel different about the same thing, if nothing changes in about 24 hours, that allows me to choose a perspective. And that's even a positive perspective in that moment to regulate. So there's some things that come to my mind.
Good thought. Yeah, I mean, healthy couples remember that there's seasons, and that the stressors externally we're working as a team to really battle the external stuff and not necessarily battle each other. And that's really hard when you are really frustrated or hurt or have a lot of wounds, which takes us to the next place, which is managing conflict. Healthy couples learn how and continue to learn how to manage conflict well. And we've talked about conflict in Core Values Index lens. We've talked about it throughout our podcast. We work heavily on this with our leaders, and in our counseling practice with our clinicians are working on this continually with families and marriages. It's probably the primary place that all of us need help with. But the key is this. Have I learned how to do my own, what the Gottmans call self-soothing, and we've reframed as self-regulating, learning what is it that makes my body stress, where it brings anxiety, that really flips my lid, to use Dr. Siegel's language, when my brain is literally, the lid is flipped and I am in fight, flight, or freeze. Have I done the work to understand my story, my wiring, and the way and the things that are impacting my body? Hormones, what I eat, exercise. There's all kinds of factors that are playing a role. Stress. And have I tuned in enough to know where my body is at calm And when am I over the top in stress? We do our worst managing conflict and listening at that point when we are in a stressful place. So learning how to do that individually as couples, it only takes one of you really to be in a calm place to help guide the couple out of a hard situation when we're beating each other up in unhealthy conflict strategies. And then the other is learning how to listen well, and then learning how to work as a team to solve solutions. As Christians who really love to look at things through a biblical worldview, one of the things in managing conflict that's really important for couples is to not make a decision, big decisions, unless you have unity as a couple. That there are two of you for a reason, and there's different wirings and different lenses that you're seeing problems. So whether you're buying a car, your parenting issues, whether you're going to move, which jobs to take, down to mostly the bigger stuff. You want to be able to hear one another, listen, move through the stressors and the conflicts, and then be able to pull away and pray. And often when you're at odds with each other, if you take time, you take a time out and take some time to pray and seek the Lord, God usually changes one of your minds to match the other, or you remain unresolved and not unified, and that means you wait. It's not time to move forward. In unhealthy systems, one person has more power and they often move ahead, and it comes back to bite you. So do you want to share a story from our life where we made decisions and with lack of unity? I'll let you choose that one.
Yeah. The principle that you're describing here is important. It's something to work towards, right? It's something that takes effort and intention and trust to work towards that place where you are looking for making decisions and having peace and unity together, and learning to trust that if you don't, that you wait. One of the earlier markers of our story, I had great intentions, but boy, right motive, but wrong method. All right. So this was like a classic early situation where I had the right motive for us and our family, but I had the wrong method. And this is, we were expecting our first, and you're pregnant. And at that time, we'd had a bunch of clunker cars that were kind of just hanging on, constantly in need of repair. And I'm just like making a vow. I'm going to be a good husband, a good father. We're going to get a car that's a newer car. That's going to be reliable. Yes, it might be more expensive, but it doesn't matter. This is for my wife and this is for our baby. And I don't want you to have to be thinking about anything. And I don't want to be thinking about anything when it comes to their safety and getting from A to B. And so what did I do? I talked with you, and you thought, we probably can't afford a new car payment. I don't really feel good about this. And I'm like, just trust me. This is what we need. This is what you need. This is going to be great. And I went out and I got us a newer, not a new, but a newer car, and got us into a newer payment. And a few months later, we had to sell that car, and we kind of lost money in the process. Yes.
I think I decided to stay home for a hot second, and we lost my salary. So,
man, I went forward with the right motive, but the wrong method. And it was just, this created a conflict for us, a conflict of I told you so, and I can't believe we did this, and I can't believe that I did this, and I'm feeling shame and having to address this. Humble pie for sure. And it was a learning process, but that was a doozy. That was an early doozy for us.
Well, you're a fast learner, and so we call it the Highlander lesson because Jeff.
You're the Highlander.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for both of us, we've learned. I have stories where I feel really confident about something, and Jeff's hesitant, and he's a very decisive guy. So when he's like, "I don't think we should do that," I would try to figure out how to convince them, hey, here's the reason. And we've just learned that God uses each other to help us with boundaries. If we're not in unity, it's probably not his best for us.
Yeah, that principle that we lean into is in Paul's edification to couples, right? And this oftentimes gets misinterpreted all over the place and gets really kind of funky. But we love the mutual submission. Submit unto one another as we mutually submit unto the Lord.
Yeah, and Ephesians 5:21.
Yeah, and that is the beauty of that whole principle there. There's different functions for us as a couple, but that principle of mutual submission has always felt so good that we submit unto one another. You're wired differently than I am, and there's things that I'm not going to see that you're going to see and feel and discern, and vice versa. And so when we link arms together, and we wait to make decisions until we have peace and we've explored our different sides and tried to understand, we have really made some really good ones.
Yes.
And we both feel good about
that.
it. Imagine
More
that,
knuckles.
right? And so it's an ideal. It's an ideal to work towards that and to help reduce conflict. When we have had a bunch, and to get better at teaming up together. And it does take just one, sure, to stay regulated. But listen, both of us, when we have that shared commitment that we can either make this better or worse, which do we choose? You have to take that personal responsibility. That's a real secret to growing as a person and to taking ownership and being a better partner in a marriage, being a better colleague at work, being a better parent, and fill in the blanks.
Well, right now we're talking about marriage. So it really is one of the most vulnerable and hardest relationships, but it has the greatest reward, because this is God's design, a place that in healthy relationships can be safe. You can really be who you are. You can try new things, which takes us to the next place of the Gottman's relationship, Soundhouse, and that is being able to help one another's dreams come true, and then the roof being having shared meaning. So one of the things that can be really difficult, especially in the family years, as couples start to have young kids, the kids become the center of your life, and we have to be very careful. We counsel a lot of couples with young families to really make sure that you keep in mind your individual needs and hobbies, because you're modeling to your kids how to be human, and you can't do it all. So as much as you like to golf before kids, you're not going to be able to do as much, but you're still going to want to help each other, versus just only being parents and providers with finances. Being able to actually have some dreams that you work towards. And sometimes those dreams take longer. Maybe you guys want to do travel, but there's not a lot of resources or money at the time, but you can still dream for that and hope for that and plan for that. And then the idea is not, and sometimes your dreams clash, meaning like one of you really loves fly fishing and the other one would not like fly fishing. So how could I help Jeff with his dreams of fly fishing, and he helped me with my dreams of
Palm Springs and a swimming pool and a boat.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't even know what my dreams are right now. And then shared meaning is the idea of having places where we can serve and have fun and actually have purpose together. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, this is kind of the pinnacle of the Gottman's Sound Relationship House. And when we say the pinnacle, it's not like it's not like you stay there and you're climbing and you have this whole journey and you never go back into the other areas like building love maps. I mean, you're going back and forth and around, and even on the sidewalls, which we haven't even talked about yet. But the shared meaning part is really so significant. It's actually over time, you as a couple can look for things and where you both connect to. Individually, there's sort of a spark towards something, and you both have that. But the idea of linking arms together to do it. So it actually you may not even have that, but you might just even try something, and doing it together, sparks kind of fly as it relates to, wow, I would have never known this feeling or had this experience. I never thought of myself ever doing this, but I'm actually loving this. This podcast is an example of that right there for me. When years ago, Tara's like, I want us to start a podcast, I was kind of like, I don't have any desire to do that. I don't really want to tell my stories or have you tell my stories or hear the stories of anybody else. I just want to, I've got to do that with a few people like you and my kids. That's enough.
Your friend.
Well, I can tell you after all these years that I love this podcast. And I thank you all the time for getting us into motion in this, because we have discovered with the interviewers, with the guests that we've had and interviewed, so many wonderful things that God's doing in this world and people are doing in this world. And it's lifted and given me great hope. And this is shared meaning. I don't dread these times. I love to sit down here and to connect with you. In this case, we're not interviewing anybody else, but it's become a great joy. So shared meaning can be something that's a total surprise. It can be something that you both start in and have a vision for and actually enjoy it from start. It is important to have some shared meaning. And earlier on, our shared meaning was our children. When they were little,
That's all we could have
they were
time
our
for.
entertainment. They were our shared meaning. They were the way in which we were connecting. We were learning so many things, and we felt closer to each other as we were raising these little ones. Right? You might be out there right now going, "Yeah, I have no time for anything." So where you are, right where you are, you can find shared meaning if you can do some things together and find joy and look for the good and the positive and laugh, laugh about some of the things that you notice. And that bonds us together, releasing oxytocin in our heads. It's awesome.
I love it. You're welcome for the podcast, by the way. Yeah. My ideas sometimes do seem to land eventually, but I would say one of the things that Jeff and I have learned that healthy couples really do learn how to do interdependence. And it's in all kinds of the marriage therapy research. It's biblical. But oftentimes couples over the years will either become what's called codependent, where there's one person who's kind of the center of the marriage and everything else circles around them. It can kind of look a little bit narcissistic at times. Or they're independent, right? You just both do your lives and you're like, hey, from afar. And it takes work to go, who am I? Who are you? And who are we together? And so sometimes the we is very simple, like raising kids together, but maybe you both enjoy cooking and you guys invite someone over once a quarter to share a meal. You love hospitality. Maybe you guys love serving and greeting at your church together and just being, a joy there. Maybe you love hosting a small group, or maybe you guys love serving and you go around and clean the neighborhood together. However, wherever you can find overlap in something that's in your life already, it's not something you need to add to. And for Jeff and I, this is our jobs. These are the things we do. We teach, we train, we write, we coach, we counsel. And over the years, we've learned that we are better together. Oftentimes when we teach together, people will come up, they don't really hear what we're saying. They're actually seeing our interaction more. And so
the way we partner.
Yeah. And so what we've learned is that when we show up together, just by being together, that is part of how God speaks to the world around us. Sometimes we have to divide and conquer. We can't do everything together. We do have an independent oldest child in each of us who needs some time by ourselves. But I do enjoy doing things with you. And it took us probably about 15 years into our marriage to really figure out how to do this kind of level of shared meaning. In the earlier years, it was a lot of the hosting a football game, and time with our kids. So now the walls, or do you have anything more you want to say?
Nah, the walls. Let's talk about them. I'll take one, you take the other. Okay. So what holds up the house, and this is something essentially that you have to actually be working on all the time and maintaining a real fidelity to. Trust is one. And trust, it seems so obvious, right? You can't really even have a relationship without trust, a good one. I mean, it's not a real relationship without that. And trust is only really developed with consistency over time. We are advocates for not just jumping in and giving people all your trust. That has been more than one person, right? Assume the best of people, but developing trust is a process of seeing people being consistent over time and exchanging, having equity in the relationship, even as you talk, and we take turns, and you build trust with people when they follow through. And so it's so important. I was talking with leaders just in my men's cohort the other day. We were launching a new men's cohort about the importance of trust and presence in leadership. I'm just talking about leadership, whether that's at work, at home, wherever they go. Trust is imperative. So many organizations, businesses and organizations and churches are really focusing on this. And it's good because there's so much broken trust everywhere around us. And people just wonder, well, how do I even find it? What's true north? And it takes effort and intention. And, trust it takes a long time to really develop it fully and to have that kind of full trust with a person. It takes a moment to break it. And then it's so important to know how to repair. So it should be a really valuable currency, like kind of like gold, I guess, something that never loses its value. That's one way I think about it.
Yeah. So in healthy relationships and healthy marriages, we protect that trust and we do what we say we're going to do. And if we don't, then we talk about it with each other. We recognize the consequence and the pain, and we ask forgiveness. And in healthy relationships, we get choices to forgive. We either say, I choose to forgive you, or I need a little time to forgive you, but we're working towards forgiveness. And those of us that follow Jesus, we get the help of the Holy Spirit and a bigger picture of why we forgive. But oftentimes in unhealthy relationships, the small micro breaks of trust don't get addressed. And one brick at a time, that wall of trust comes down. And so we have to do a good job of repairing and making sure we maintain trust. I'll share an example from my own lacking trust early on. Small things was I would say I'd be home. This is pre kind of tracking devices on our phones and all the other ways that we kind of watch each other and keep track of each other. But I would say I'd be home by 8 and I would be home by 9:30. Now, Jeff was not concerned about me being, going outside of our marriage, but he was more concerned about safety. Like, am I dead on the side of the road kind of a thing? And what happened was I was social, I would get lost in the moment, and I would be taking care of the people right in front of me. Yeah. So if I was at a meeting, I was looking at them, and if they needed to talk more, I would spend the extra hour processing with them or laughing and I forgot about Jeff, right? Who's my primary person in my life that I need to keep trust with. And so I would defend myself and argue and try to make it about Jeff. But at the end of the day, I now understand like, wow, I was shooting myself in the foot because if I said I was going to be home at 8 and I was home at 9:30, that's on me. And especially with no text or update of where I am. And so today it's so easy. In fact, our whole family does a lot of we can track each other, but part of the practice for our girls is learning it's respectful and honoring and it builds trust. Especially as teenagers, right? Of I'm heading to Chipotle, or we've now shifted houses, or I'm going to be home in a half hour. Those kinds of skills is really healthy in a relationship because you are keeping the people you say you love the most in front of you when the rest of the world is calling for your attention. Now, are there mistakes? Yes. And we would repair and ask forgiveness. But I think overall, I've gotten better on that.
100%. Yeah. And it feels great. Breeds freedom, right? Because then I don't have to I'm not nagging to make sure that you're safe. I know that you're going to let me know. And if something were to happen, I would know where to go first, right? That's kind of, there's that. And it's also the trust of just the connection, staying connected. Yeah. And,
so now I might say it's 8:00. I know I said be home. It looks like we need a little bit more time. I'm going to probably be another hour. Is that good with you? And you're like, totally. It's not like you're controlling or some of the things that couples will start to think about each other.
It's understanding impact.
It's respectful and understanding impact.
Yeah, because you might not have known like, oh, shoot, I would love to give you that time, but I had just made a commitment to be over here at this. And
I need the car.
Yeah. So it helps with communication too. Yeah. And so trust is important. And the other side.
The other wall is commitment. So kind of with the positive perspective that Jeff was talking about is the frame of reference and you thinking, okay, the best of each other and we got this. Commitment is really the hardcore, I do, and I am going to do what it takes to work on staying committed to you. And so if that means we need to get help, we go to counseling, we have mentors, we have regular rhythms in our life that draw us back together regularly. So Jeff and I are committed to hearing one another, to being involved in one another's schedules. So we have a business meeting and then we have a heart time where we're connecting about our emotions and what we're learning and being able to be friends. So commitment is more than just, I will stay with you no matter what. Commitment is where am I putting my time and my energy, and am I willing to sacrifice a bit of uncomfortable in order to keep moving forward through whatever difficult season we're in. It's keeping the long view in mind. And I'll tell you, when you're committed, you can go through anything together. because it's that sound wall on the side that allows you to do all the other work inside the sound relationship house.
Creates structure.
It creates structure and security that often when we even introduce an idea of, if you do this, then I'm out, or threatening with words, even maybe not intending to walk out on a relationship, but maybe you leave the house and your spouse doesn't know where you're at. That can trigger abandonment, all kinds of things. So unhealthy relationships, we're still working on building that house. In healthy relationships, we have healthy habits of saying, I'm for you, I'm for us. And for those of us that follow Jesus, God is for us. And honestly, there's a lot of effort that healthy marriages have to do. And so often couples will compare and be like, well, it's not as hard for them. And I'll say, I've sat with thousands of couples. Yes, it is. It's just as hard for them. It's just oftentimes they're leaning in and continuing to have some of these key aspects. But you can only do so much as a partner. It does take both of you. And so both of you've got to be committed.
Yeah. And on that commitment there, one last piece, it's really important. It's a commitment to protecting the sanctity of that you're my person. No other person gets access to me like you get, and vice versa. And that's a protection of faithfulness and fidelity. And it's you have to protect that, and you have to be vigilant about that. We can be vulnerable to using others to get our needs met in unhealthy ways, and other people can want to use us to get their needs in unhealthy ways. And so it's saying that first and foremost, God's voice is primary in my relationship with you, but secondarily, the second most important voice in my life is you. And the second most important person in my life is you. And so it's to say, I choose you over everyone else. And healthy couples and healthy marriages are committed to that kind of protection, and they're committed to taking that seriously and not just being laissez-faire about it. And if there's brokenness that takes place there, again, the repair is hard in those scenarios, but it's very possible and very worth it where it can be done.
Yeah, and just to bring some hope is that you don't just arrive as a healthy couple. This is an active process. And so there's times where we can border on unhealth or even lean into unhealthy. So if you're in an unhealthy marriage or you're feeling like, wow, this is a lot of stuff, I don't know if we've got one of those down, just that there's hope to pick one aspect of the relationship. You know, the foundation of getting to know each other, know yourself and to know the other really well, and trust and commitment are good parts to the relationship house. It's hard to do a lot of the other pieces if you don't have those down. And so healthy couples ask for help. I think we've always had mentors individually and as a couple since the beginning of our relationship. And we've also had a professional counselor on board, and we definitely have always leaned into a counselor over the years. And so some of those earlier years, we were working really hard on some of the bottom part of our house. And so it's been fun to be more free, to be able to make one another's dreams come true and have shared meaning, and to revisit those skill sets that we need to when we start to get, I'll speak to me, when I start to get lazy. I don't mean, but we all just do as human beings. And honestly, the family years are the hardest. So I want to just validate, if you have just had kids and you're in those first 7 years of having kids,
it's exhausting.
It's hard. Your first years of marriage can be difficult because you're really trying to figure out, who are you and who am I? And this relationship is different than any other relationship you've had. The other hardest time is when the kids leave the house, is because so many couples have spent all their marriage years working on the kids, and they lost sight of each other and themselves. And so that 25-ish year mark, between 20 and 25, when kids are in the teen years and they're really stressful, and then they launch. So those would be really key times to lean in for help and just to get things shored up. If you are proactive like us, you might do it way before. So love couples who do that.
Love singles that do that. If you're single right now and marriage is something that you desire, but it's not in the immediate future, it's not, This is wonderful things to be thinking about and to be growing, to becoming as healthy of a person as you can be. And if marriage isn't something that you are aspiring to, it's so much beauty in being single as well, and
Mhm.
you can still be a better human, a better single, and a better friend, and a better person in your communities by practicing some of these skills relationally outside of a marriage. Obviously, some things are designed for the marriage, but yeah, principles can be applied, and they are transferable in some respects.
Yeah. I just want to point out that I noticed we didn't say healthy habits for marriage means you have sex all the time or that you're happy all the time or that I don't know, some of these like cultural
Myths
myths that we have this idea. In fact, it's nowhere in the relationship. Now, there are parts of it. There is happiness and joy, a part of a
that your spouse
marriage.
is going to complete you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Should
Completeness.
complete me. Like,
Um, yeah, our financial success, all that. I mean, sometimes that is one of the biggest stressors for a couple is money and parenting and sex. Those are the three biggest issues. And usually we start with, let's learn to talk about the things. Let's learn to hear one another and what you both bring to the table because you're both needed in the marriage. So I hope you've been encouraged today. I'm going to have Jeff. One of the things I really appreciate and I've learned from him, maybe I won't. Yes, I will. I'm looking at my computer right now. But I want you to end with just the challenge around 1 Corinthians 13 and how you've used this passage in your own life.
Okay, well, I'll read this here. It's 1 Corinthians 13, 4-8, known in the Bible as the love chapter,
You've heard it
written by the Apostle Paul. Many weddings, you've heard this, but read this and think about putting your name in there in some of these. So love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It doesn't dishonor others, it's not self-seeking, it's not easily angered, and it keeps no records of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. Love never fails.